there are a number of law firm owners out there who are truly solos, who want to be solos, who are solos by choice. And for all of you and for all of us that started that way and grown, we have probably one person to thank more than anybody else. And she's joining me today, Carolyn Elefant. I am super nerding out having you here. It is so cool to be able to chat with you. I wish I had gone to MyShingle.com so much earlier and avoided so many of the mistakes that I made day one, but I'm sure that there are hundreds and thousands of lawyers who were smarter than me and got your insight and wisdom. So listen, if you know me and you don't know Carolyn, I refuse to believe that's the case, but just in case, she's the owner of a national law firm focused on power lines, and property, and the creator of MyShingle.com, the blog that inspired the launch of thousands of law firms, and the author of Solo by Choice, which I think just released its third edition.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Right.
Awesome. And like, seriously, such a cool person to talk to who has such a wonderful perspective on all these things, because I think there's so many people out there that are just like, grow a firm, be larger, get more cases, hire more people, dominate, crush. And that's just not going to be reasonable or true or the most important thing for so many people. And so I love that Carolyn stands out here as probably the go-to expert on the Solo by Choice, but certainly a wonderful person, a wonderful brand, a wonderful advocate for anybody who really wants to have a smaller law firm and do a phenomenal job and live a wonderful life and be there for your clients. And just, I love everything that you do. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. This is great. This is great. So nice to talk to you.
And I will tell you, so our last episode, we had Lori Gonzalez on. So at every episode, we always start with the previous one, and then we go through this episode, we talk about the next one. I think there's a 10-minute conversation between Lori and I raving about you when I was like, oh, in our next episode, she's like, oh my God, Carolyn, yeah, she's wonderful. So that doesn't come up that often, but I wanted to highlight it because Lori and I had such a great chat last week where we talked about managing processes and people. So automation, outsourcing, and all those things in between. But I am super excited to have this conversation where we're talking about personal satisfaction. We're talking about innovation and diversity. Oh my. So Carolyn, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. And just to put in a good word for Lori, Lori is the queen of every topic that you just mentioned that you both talked about. So I'll have to go back and look at that, listen to that episode.
I can take credit for one thing. I don't remember what it was. I remember I said one thing to her. She's like, that's going in all my future slideshows. And I was like, you can have it. So no, because I'm right there with you. And just, we had a cool, it's a really cool conversation because we talk about a lot of this on the high level, and then there's enough of those specific takeaways to give people kind of the where to start. So no matter where you are in the journey of outsourcing, of managing people, of growing, of delegating, of automating, you'll find a ton of wisdom here. So that being said, we've got Carolyn live. So let's dive into this. We're taking your questions. If you've got any questions, feel free to drop them. I know I have a bunch of questions as we go through our stuff, but I wanted to hear a little bit more about your journey. Like, I know obviously MyShingle, I know the book, but like, walk me through what led you to start those things.
Well, I guess that all dates back to my decision to start my own firm. I had worked for a government agency and for a big law firm. I was told that I had 6 months notice to find another job because I wasn't partnership track. And to be fair, I was very upset at the time, but looking back, I was a terrible employee. I didn't want to do stuff for other people. I mean, I wanted to do things that interested me, and I didn't follow up on a lot of my assignments, so I deserved to be shown the door. So I started my own firm really to sort of fill a gap. And I realized over time that it was actually a very good choice. And I often say that I started solo because I didn't have an option, but then I stayed solo or stayed as a law firm owner because by that time I did have at least some summer people working for me. I stayed that way because I had children and it was the best option. So after I'd been doing that for a while, during the .com era, there were a lot of people who were starting websites on like, petfood.com, dogfood.com. And I thought, what about a site that serves solo and small firms? Because at the time, like American Law Media dominated the news, and they really just spoke to large firms. And the ABA Journal would, to its credit, often have a story here and there about solo and small firm lawyers, but they never really talked about how to get started or people doing different things or the role that solos and smalls play in the legal profession and in in the whole court system in terms of representing consumer interests in smaller businesses. And so I set out wanting to start a site that would be everything solo and small, but the technology just didn't exist. This was almost 20 years ago. My 20th anniversary is in a month.
Hey, congrats.
My husband had the idea to use this platform called Slashcode, which was basically a blog, but it was much more complicated than the blogs today. You didn't just push a button, you had to like upload stuff on file transfer protocols and like play with 1,000 different controls just to change the color or the shade of the background. So that was how it started. And I started with a handful of other bloggers who were not looking at blogs as anything entrepreneurial or anything money-making. People were just looking at it as a way to have discourse. And so I went from having this conception of a site that was going to be money-making to something that was just, a way of participating in discourse online. So that was how it got started. And the book grew out of that. There was a publishing company that they had a line of books that served lawyers who were interested in alternative careers, and they had seen my blog and asked if I wanted to write a book on starting a practice. So that was how I got to that point.
And the other thing that I want to echo to your credit that never really occurred to me until, I don't know, I was reading Jim Collins' Good to Great. And he talks about how many of these businesses did get these like giant nationwide exposure pieces, but it was always like 10, 12, 15 years after they did the thing that made them deserving of it. And so when you're talking about, yes, there were these larger firm focused things that would highlight a solo. I feel like it's, hey, 7 years ago, this one solo attorney did this great thing. And now look at the results. Whereas like as a true solo, you don't have that time frame to hear, what worked then may not work now, or to figure out what's working now in, 5, 10, 15 years. So I love how, MyShingle.com, not just the focus, but the expediency of like, this is what smaller firms can be doing right now, 20 years ago, just as relevant on, March 11th of 2020, when COVID hits, just as relevant as it is today on the 20th anniversary, or a month from the 20th anniversary.
Yeah, no. And of course, as you know, things change so quickly now. I mean, now you're looking at turnaround times of literally 6 months, something that works, especially with something like TikTok or Instagram, where you have these minute-to-minute algorithms, and something that worked 6 months ago may not work anymore just 6 months later. So keeping current and staying on top of the new trends is really important.
And so we've got kind of our 3 topics: that personal satisfaction, the innovation, and the diversity. So let's just nail those in that order. So from the personal satisfaction of a solo by choice, kind of walk me through some of the, what can a solo expect from a personal satisfaction standpoint?
Right. So a couple of things. So the book is called Solo by Choice, and that's because, most people who start do stay solo. Some people grow, some don't. And today, I think what's interesting is there's kind of a different definition of solo, because you can have a firm that's technically one principal attorney with a team of 4 or 5 people behind them. I would still consider that sort of a solo or a small firm. Or you could have a firm that has a couple of different attorneys working for them. But I guess I consider solo to be a firm, not necessarily just one attorney doing everything, but an attorney with maybe some sort of team behind them, part-time contract workers or things like that. So in terms of the personal satisfaction aspect of it, when you do run a firm that way, you are really the person in charge. And so you can pursue the cases that you want to pursue, come up with a business plan,